Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the Two Matts for the week ending Friday, the 2nd of February. A podcast...
February already.
It is February already.
Oh, blimey.
And this is a podcast funded by a nefarious cabal of new European readers.
A growing number of nefarious people.
Who funds you, Matt?
Well, you do. You're my boss. So, nefarious Matt
let's
Kelly.
be transparent about that.
No, we're going to be transparent, yeah.
What did we talk about this episode? What should we...
We made merry around the ridiculous figure of Laurence Fox and
we did.
Amongst other things.
Yeah, and then we talked...
about Rishi fasting.
Rishi's diet regime.
Yes.
And then we talked about the great Jürgen Klopp.
Oh, yeah, so two idiots and one great man.
And one great man. So we could call it that.
No.
Should we call it that? Or...
Two idiots and a great man.
Will people click on that? That's what we want, though.
No, you see, and you know, though we hate clickbait, we love it.
Yeah.
And so
we're entirely dependent on it.
We despise it and stand above it.
What about Laurence Fox Off?
Laurence Fox Off?
Laurence Fox Off.
Love it.
That's clicky, isn't it?
It is very clicky.
All right. Okay. So this is the Two Matts, episode 31, Laurence Fox Off.
Enjoy.
So, Matt, what are we talking about this week?
Well, I think it would be a shame not to celebrate
Heap
derision
upon Laurence Fox.
The tawdry horror that is Laurence Fox losing his High Court libel battle on Monday.
Yeah.
Maybe actually producer Matt can give us a quick burst of the world's least appealing bohemian standing in front of the courts.
What is a racist? Every single person in this country knows what a racist is, except the people that dominate every single national institution that we have and every single organisation which has got anything to do with educating our children and everything else. This racism term is used just as a point of disagreement and a point of, I don't like you, therefore you're a racist. But this is a great and wonderful country, and I admire and I respect this country, and I fight for it, and I fight for my children, and I fight for everybody else out there who doesn't have my platform, who gets called these vicious slurs, and I just want a definition of the word.
Right,
that's enough of that. Well, I mean, that's proving what a racist is. You know, there should have been a caption underneath saying "and racist" and racist.
He seems to misunderstand what a defamation trial's all about, though.
He does.
It's got nothing to do with the definition of racist. It's whether he's damaged his reputation or not.
Completely. And should we give a little bit of background? So
yes, I think that's good.
Read into it. So in October 2020, Laurence Fox announced he would boycott Sainsbury's, you know, which I imagine came as a terrible shock to them because, and I quote, they support racial segregation and discrimination. And all this was that the store had established some safe spaces, which were online support groups, in the heat of Black Lives Matter and to show support for Black History Month. To use his phrase, really, it's a nothing burger of a complaint, right? Yeah. However, people rightly said, what you doing? And amongst the people that said you're being racist were the former RuPaul Drag Race contestant Crystal and Simon Blake, who is former deputy chair of the LGBT rights charity Stonewall. And he responded, Loza responded by calling them charmingly paedophiles, right?
Straight out of the Elon Musk social media.
Exactly, the Thai guy stuff and all that. Yeah. And so they totally reasonably said, well, they were going to sue Fox for defamation. And he countersued for defamation about racism. And it's not good to swoon over judges as a rule, but I am gonna. Mrs. Justice Collins Rice, who's my new hero, ruled on Monday that Laurence Fox's labelling of Crystal and Blake as paedophiles was seriously harmful, defamatory and baseless, which sounds to me common sense. But the brilliant thing was the judge then said, yes, calling someone a racist can have an inherently defamatory tendency. However, and this is a big however, Mr. Fox did not sufficiently show the tweets had caused harm to his reputation, basically because he didn't have one. Yeah. And this was the killer quote, make readers adversely change their minds about him to that degree. He basically had no reputation to lose.
Exactly.
And that's a really good judgment.
Yeah,
I think. And I mean, the Laurence Fox Saga tawdry and horrible as it is, has been going on basically since November 2020, when he appeared famously on Question Time.
Yeah.
And he got crazy because an audience member called him a white privileged male. And ever since then, he's just been engaged on this one man. Really, he's a troll. He's a provocateur.
He seems to be having some sort of a chronic breakdown as well.
Well, I think,
he?
It also clutching at straws to explain the drying up of his acting career.
Yeah.
I think he was Hathaway, wasn't he, on Lewis, or that was his only big role.
Didn't he say he was tapped up, or he was about to be tapped up for a job on Succession?
Yes,
but the Succession writers said
we did talk about him.
News to us, but we talked about him a lot, but not in
respect
that
to a part. Yeah, I mean, and Bond, I think, as well. But he is, by any meaning of the word, he is a racist and done racist stuff. So last August, he posted a photo of himself in blackface, describing himself as having racially transitioned. Ho ho ho. Huh. In September, he got into a to and fro with a guy called Sace Holmes Lewis, who's the CEO of a mentoring organisation called Mentivity. And Fox said on Twitter, "I suggest you F off back to Jamaica." Now that's clearly openly racist. So, he and then there's little things like in that long speech, which went on for 9 minutes, the whole thing. I was watching it, and he said he was complaining about people saying outrageously horrible things. Well, this is a guy who, on GB News in September, called the very good journalist Ava Evans horribly misogynistic things.
Yes, that's right.
And in fact, eventually, and it's pretty high bar, got sacked from GB News.
And took a few others down with him, didn't he?
Yeah, Calvin...
The preacher.
Robinson, the preacher. Yeah. The preacher.
Calvin, no one can remember your name now.
And he was arrested in October for over comments that appeared to encourage people to vandalise ULEZ cameras. And, he's just a provocateur. He's a trickster. He's not a serious person.
But there is a bigger story here, isn't there?
Yes.
Which is,
yes, there is.
Marina Hyde wrote a great column about Laurence Fox and ended it, I thought, quite rightly, saying, he's the monkey. Let's talk about the organ grinder. And the organ grinder is a man called Jeremy Hosking.
Who's a very wealthy man.
Very wealthy guy.
Asset manager and businessman.
And I think he's worth something like 350 million quid.
Yeah.
And he has literally pumped millions into the Leave campaign, into a new magazine called The Critic, which contains
some good pieces,
but some kind of stuff I look at and think, wow, that's on the far end of the spectrum, of political kind of messaging. But he's also, he's pumped like maybe hundreds of thousands of pounds towards Andrew Bridgen.
Yeah, and more millions, I think.
Yeah. Extraordinary amounts of interest-free loans to his. By the way, anybody who wants to entertain themselves for 10 minutes, look at Andrew Bridgen's Register of Interests in the House of Commons. It's unbelievable.
Really?
It goes on and on and on and on.
He has a lot of interest.
It's incredible. And apparently, it's the most bizarre story because he's funding Bridgen's battle with his family over their potato business. It's the most surreal thing. But he's also giving Laurence Fox hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Laurence Fox's so-called Reclaim Party.
Yeah.
I wonder how many members that has. Hosking gave, in the first quarter of 2021, more than £1 million in cash and services.
Wow.
Lots of money. So what you have here is, as you say, lots of plutocrats playing games, giving money to unsavoury people. And it's all, a game is the word, because it's this game being played by alt-right parties and alt-right funders. It is sort of People's Front of Judea and Judea People's Front. So if Laurence Fox hates anyone more than people like us, it's the Reform with Richard Tice, because Reform has come out in favour of vaccination, which of course he regards as...
Right.
Basically being communist. And they engage in these kind of semi-entertaining rows.
Yeah.
He's a ghastly figure, but he does have a platform and he does get onto the telly and he does get play on social media. And I don't know what you think, but my kind of takeaways, obviously delighted that what happened, and I hope he disappears, but I'm pretty sure he won't. But the other thing is that there is a broader question, which is that Laurence Fox and people like him, they demean serious questions about and debates about social justice issues, which are really important.
Yeah.
So I did a book a couple of years ago about identity politics, and I got really stuck into it. And it seemed to me that, yes, I mean, a lot of liberals hate identity politics, but identity politics is something we've all got to come to terms with, because it's a necessary approach to old school liberalism and universalism, and it's partly because meritocracy and the courts haven't worked. And
Matt, just explain, because I mean, there'll be some people who are sitting there thinking, what do you mean exactly by identity politics?
Well, it's a good question. Well, identity politics is a politics where instead of seeing yourself primarily as an individual, you see yourself primarily as being a member of a protected category or a racial group or whatever it might be. And of course, that's contrary to the Enlightenment tradition, the idea of individual citizenship, and people balk at it. But the reason it has happened is because the system has failed. I mean, Black Lives Matter and Me Too didn't happen just to be awkward. They happened because people of colour and women felt that the system wasn't addressing them. Now, there's all sorts of subtle issues that have come out of that, and some of it's really, really detailed. So to give an example, I think one of the problems with identity politics is it tends to be a bit scolding. It tends to be too opposed to free speech. So last week, a woman called Jo Phoenix won her case against the Open University. She's a gender-critical feminist, and the tribunal found that she had indeed been constructively dismissed by the OU and harassed. And that was sort of one case. And, then you look at the whole Andrew Tate phenomenon. And I was looking today in the paper, and it said 1 in 4 UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman. And a fifth now look favourably on the social media influencer Andrew Tate, according to an Ipsos
Incredible.
poll.
An openly extreme misogynist.
Yeah, so there's that. And then, Sathnam Sanghera, the great Sathnam Sanghera, has just got a new and brilliant book out called Empire World, which is trying to address questions of, the long-term impact of colonisation upon world history, and, brilliant. And this is a really important... There are a whole series of things going on, and they don't all run in parallel streams, but what they have in common is that they're subtle and nuanced. And sometimes the response to them leads to a terrible overcorrection, like Ron DeSantis's Florida, where there's he calls it the place where woke goes to die, and there are these terrible repressive laws now which mean you can't even teach critical race theory or gender ideology in universities, which is insane. I mean, you don't. There's a difference between saying universities shouldn't be captured by those ideologies, but it's absolutely the case that students should know about them. They're important and important and very relevant ideas. So
and my sense is that it's become like a new taboo in society, discussing it, and people are slightly afraid to discuss it.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way that you'd be, reluctant to talk about sex or mental health 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now people are terrified about talking about identity politics. Yeah. And then it opens the door to people who are brazenly not to come in, and they start polarising the whole.
That's why I said that I think that the fatal flaw in the social justice movements is not so much an intellectual one, but it's a kind of intolerance of anyone who disagrees even slightly. As it were. Unless you capitulate immediately and take stenography, you're a fascist.
And the language of the condemnation is bizarre.
And this is very strong, particularly on campuses. I mean, there's no point in denying it. It's very strong in publishing. It's very strong in some sections of the media. And that is a dead end. You have to be able to, in a civilised way, there have to be discussions. And there are some issues which do have to be litigated by the courts. And the problem, just to circle back to Laurence Fox, is that people like him take issues about like what it is to be a racist and weaponize them and turn them into clickbait or a circus act, and it's incredibly regressive, because I'm sure that there are some people, not many, but some, or maybe there are many, I don't know, who, listening to that buffoon standing in front of the Court of Justice in his spray-on jeans with his annoying scarf, and think, he's right, you can't say nothing anymore. And I think that it's really important to push back against that and say all these issues are going to not dominate, but they're going to play a very important part in politics in the next 10 or 15 years. And you can't some liberals, I think, just say, no, I hate identity politics, I don't want anything to do with it. Well, that's not an option anymore, generationally or, in fact, logically. But it's a subtle, nuanced, delicate business.
Yeah.
And people like him, with their kind of performative outrage, just don't take the debate anywhere.
So there was an email that he was forced to disclose in this trial, which opened the whole lid on what he's doing and what his game is. And he used that word, the game. I'm getting paid a fortune for this game, he said.
There you go.
Better to be rich and hated than poor and out of work from Asda, he said. That was his...
Well, that tells you everything.
And he's getting
£250,000
a year from Jeremy Hoskins via the Reclaim Party. And the thing that I'm fascinated about is that it's not just these weird, spiky, acute incidents of people popping up and being funded by this, what you could call dark money.
Yeah.
But there are institutions that have had dramatic effects on British life in the last decade or longer that are entirely opaque in their funding and yet get huge visibility on national platforms like Question Time, the BBC, or politics lunchtime shows and all of this, with their spokespeople talking and increasingly being challenged about who is paying you to talk.
There should be, we've talked before about low-hanging fruit for Keir Starmer, and one of the things that he should definitely do in the Electoral Commission and other regulatory bodies is encourage total transparency of funding.
Yeah.
You should know when you watch someone on the telly who is funding them, who's paying their wages.
Exactly. So the Institute of Economic Affairs is the standout case.
Yeah.
And there's no question they have had a dramatic effect on our nation.
Yes.
They have groomed people like Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng.
And they go back to the early Thatcherism.
But no one knows where they get their money from.
Right.
Nobody knows.
And it's essential always to know where the money comes from. And oddly enough, there's more transparency in America than there is here. And I think that, this is now a clear and present danger, actually. We need to know who is funding people like Laurence Fox. Because actually, the question to be asked about someone like Fox is, what's he really there to do? Because he's not an electoral actor, actually. He lost his deposit in the Uxbridge and Ruislip by-election last July. He got nowhere in the London mayoral race. He stands as a sort of... screaming Lord racist candidate, in these things. But he's not ever going to be elected to anything.
No.
But his role in the culture is actually to do just what he did, which is to stand in front of the courts and say, I'm being oppressed. Now, he's not able to turn that to his advantage in the way that, say, Trump is in America. But we need to be very alive to the fact that even as it's rightly we're scorning him because he's ridiculous. He's preposterous. But there's a model there which a more impressive and eloquent and less preposterous figure could use.
Totally. And also there'll be people screaming at their computers or iPhones or whatever they're listening to this on, saying, well, stop talking about him then. If he's just a figure of ridicule, stop giving the oxygen. And I completely agree with that, except to say that
it's a very dangerous principle, that.
It is, because it gives them a free hit. And also, I think the more when we talk about Laurence Fox, the more we talk about the people who are funding him, the better. I think the more limelight, this is what these guys don't want. They don't want the limelight shone on them. They want them shone on the monkeys, like Laurence Fox dancing by the organ.
You asked the right question there, which is here's this idiot. But who is pulling the strings? Who's funding it? That's the question. And that's why we have to keep talking about people like Laurence Fox, is because there will be others, and a lot of them, because this is going to... The issues about which Laurence Fox speaks in a very unimpressive and defamatory way are going to be with us for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And there will be... People will pay people like him to do things like this.
Yeah.
And so to that objection, which is don't give them the oxygen of publicity, that's always to me a very dangerous argument for journalism generally, because that means not covering things of which you disapprove, and how do you make that judgment? It's a breach of the covenant of journalism. Our job is to tell people what's going on, good or bad, but at the same time to do so with open eyes and say he's not just a failed actor making an idiot of himself. Actually, there is something quite alarming going on, which is there's a plutocrat behind him giving him lots of money to carry on this crazy campaign, and you need to watch out for the next one. And there will be a next one.
Definitely. Well, what I'm gonna do is ask James Ball, who's a terrific investigator,
great man, great investigator,
journalist, and who does a great column in the New European each week, to dig into not the monkeys but the organ grinders. And
that'd be great. Those organ grinders in full. Yeah.
We'll do a piece on the dark money and find out as much as we can about.
And when you think that reform is now certainly a factor in the coming general election, and Reclaim is a joke party, but we need to know about that ecosphere of far right groupings and how they're being funded, as you say, and what is their game plan? What are they really up to? And
because I'm quite it's always dangerous you start thinking it all starts feeling like a conspiracy, but I do suspect that there is a kind of macro organization, not a formal organization, but there's
a network.
There's a definite network of people, and I'm sure it's coordinated to some degree or other, and they are bent on moving people's opinions to a way that is clearly detrimental to the people themselves, but beneficial to this very small group of
and I think that they are. I mean, one of the things that can never be underestimated is the extent to which all this came together during and after COVID. Which is, let's use people's unresolved feelings about the pandemic and turn them against science, turn them against the state, turn them against doctors. Now this is, again, as ever, much more pronounced in America, but you can see it here.
Oh, definitely. And the same thing happened over Brexit, of course. Let's get people fearful about what it means to be British.
Yes.
And what does it mean to have a Polish supermarket in your village? And are you being overrun? And, right, let's close the border. Let's take back control. This hypnotic nonsense.
People always say anti-vax is predominantly amongst ethnic minorities, and it's true. There is an element of that, and that's connected to the actually very disturbing history of the connection between medicine and ethnic minorities. There are reasons for that. But let's not, we all know middle-class people who, as a luxury belief since COVID, have started to become anti-vax, and look at the measles rates. They are now, it is now...
Well, the bloody Daily Mail campaigned for years, or suggested for years, that the MMR
but
jab was a problem, and was dangerous.
And now we're seeing
kids dying because of that. Done, Paul Dacre.
Even though Wakefield's Lancet report was retracted and he was struck off decades? I mean, long time ago. The long tail of that has continued, and of course, it's been given fresh air by the COVID arguments, and so I just think there's a whole cluster of things here where I want to know more about who's funding what and to what end. I really do.
By the way, did you see, talking of Brexit, did you see Andrea Leadsom? There's a clip on social media. Was it Kay Burley she was talking to? Kay Burley did a good interview with her and was saying, all these price rises and businesses going out of business because of these new checks at the border. And Andrea Leadsom, with a straight face, saying, people knew all about that. Businesses knew all about that. But what struck me is she actually used the phrase, or of course, people are talking about it this week because it's all coming home to roost. And I thought, amazing. You're actually using the phrase chickens coming home to roost to describe the thing that you campaighed for.
The chickens that you specifically denied did not exist. The whole thing was there are no chickens.
Yeah, there are chickens.
There ain't no chickens here.
No, but now suddenly chickens, they're all swarming in.
We told you there were chickens and now they're coming home to roost. What are you complaining about?
Unbelievable.
I mean, I do think, I don't know what your snap view of the New Deal on Northern Ireland is, but my feeling is that it's much less stable than it looks, because Priti Patel yesterday in the House of Commons asked Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary, whether Brexit divergence would still be possible. And Heaton-Harris said something to the effect of, oh, yes, subject to the needs of the United Kingdom. So in other words, no. Because in order to keep Northern Ireland in this strange, still in the single market position, it will actually be very difficult for governments in this country to diverge from European standards.
No, of course. Perhaps it can be used as a model for the rest of the country.
You know what? I think, to be honest, it's probably good news, because if Starmer wins, he's not going to want to diverge from European standards. And actually, that might make the case for going back in the single market a little bit easier. Who knows?
Right. Anyway, thank you for that first half. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back in a moment with more of the same.
More of the same. And yet better.
But better. So, Mr. President, thank you firstly for joining us.
It's always a pleasure to be on the Two Mats, my favourite podcast.
That's very generous of you to say that. And I would wonder,
very generous guy. I came in here, I said, what a generous guy.
I wondered whether you would extend that generosity to telling the good folks about our wonderful newspaper, the New European.
Wonderful newspaper.
Yeah.
Build a wall with New Europeans.
Mr. President, I wish they would. You are a subscriber yourself, aren't you?
Had a subscription since it was founded.
Yeah.
From the beginning, I said, Brexit, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's right.
I want the New European.
I think you misunderstood the premise of the New European, if you don't mind me saying so, Mr. President.
What a nasty thing to say. Sad.
May I tell the audience how to get a subscription, Mr. President?
A lot of guys would do it going to a newsagent. Not our guys. No. Our guys go online.
Which president are you now, Mr. President?
John F. Kennedy. Author of Profiles in Courage.
Right.
I have it on audiobook.
Well, Mr. Trump, thank you so much for that. And if people do want to follow up on your fantastic words of wisdom, they can get a subscription by going to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. That's the number 2, MATTS. And you can have it from just £1 a week. Or if you like to get the newspaper delivered, as the president does, all the way to the White House every single
All the way
week.
to Mar-a-Lago, I said to Melania, where's my New European? She said, I've already read it.
You can
Baron, my son, he reads it.
You can get
Never
that for...
wouldn't recognise it.
He has shot up, Mr. President. What are you feeding him?
KFC. Healthy foods, healthy American foods.
If you want to subscribe, and I commend it to you, if it's good enough for Donald, it's good enough for you, go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. You can have it for just £1 a week or £2 a week if you want the newspaper delivered every single week. And that is a saving of more than 80% on the newsstand. So please do it. Support our journalism.
Make the media great again.
That's enough, Mr. President, really. Thank you.
So, retrospectors, what historical events are we ticking off on this week's run of Today in History?
Well, Monday was the anniversary of Bakelite, the plastic that changed the world.
Then Tuesday marked the day a woman turned up in New York claiming to be Princess Anastasia.
On Wednesday, Charlie Chaplin stepped out as the tramp for the first time.
On Thursday, we uncovered the story of the first credit card.
And on Friday, we celebrate 22 years since the first Pop Idol final.
We discuss this and more on Today in History with the Retrospectors. 10 minutes every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts.
So welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Matt, what are we going to talk about in part 2?
Well, a lot of people are going on about World War III, but frankly, the real issue of our time is the Prime Minister's fasting regime. And it was very funny because...
It's not long enough is my
yeah, well, no, exactly. Go for it, Rishi. So what happened was there was a sort of brief, and indeed it's still going on, new plot mark chapter 10. Simon Clark, former cabinet minister and close ally of Liz Truss, writing in the Telegraph that it's time for Sunak to go. And you could see that they were thinking towards the end of the week, we better release something that shows how tough he is. So they briefed the Sunday Times that Rishi does not eat from 5 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon until 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Woof, woof, yeah. Right? And, the quotes unattributed were, he's incredibly disciplined. It's remarkable, really, given that he's often on visits or doing PMQ prep on a Monday. It's a real testament to the discipline, focus and determination that he shows in all aspects of his life and work. Now, okay, so they're trying to make him sound like David Goggins, right? You know, strong-willed, butch.
It's only a matter of time before he's photographed sort of bare-chested on a horse.
On a horse, you know, exactly.
Riding
He's
over
sort
a
of
river.
Putin on ketosis. So doing his, I mean, but as always with Rishi, when he does one of these things, it backfires immediately. So one of the things that made me laugh was, and I WhatsApped you immediately about this, was I looked up, because I had a vague memory of someone telling me that ketosis is actually very bad for you unless you really know what you're doing. And so here are some of the side effects of ketosis is when you fast long enough, like 36 hours, that your body actually basically starts to eat itself, starts to eat fat. It's a metabolic state. The side effects include headache, fatigue, brain fog, constipation, poor sleep, nausea, and decreased physical performance. Now, that to me is a pretty accurate description of our glorious government. I mean, if you wanted to describe, if you wanted to sort of give a medical diagnosis of this government, that nails it.
Yeah. What's I mean, this is clearly some sort of. He thinks that he can win a popularity contest, doesn't he?
Well, this is. I mean, and now we're at the bone, which is.
Almost literally,
Rishi. The idea that would appeal to people right now. So, by coincidence, on Tuesday in the Commons, a petition was laid down drawing attention to the fact that, wait for this, 1 in 4 UK households with children have experienced food insecurity, estimating 4 million children.
This is the United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom,
2024.
the 5th or 6th most wealthy country in the world. 28% of young mothers are skipping meals every day, with this figure rising to 37% of young mums who are on universal credit. So,
can we just say that again one more time? Because
in the United
people might
Kingdom,
have just missed the numbers.
27%? 28%.
28%. So more than 1 in 4 young mothers
are skipping meals. Right.
Because they are skint.
So the idea that it's going to appeal to the electorate, that he is doing this out of choice.
Yeah.
He is starving himself out of choice and then parading the fact as evidence of his flinty character. It does show. I mean, I think that Out of Touch actually is going to be one of the big vote winners for Labour.
But you know what it's reminiscent of is that guy, Jack Dorsey, the Twitter founder, who was famous for his kind of like uber extreme diets and exercise regimes. And it's all this kind of Silicon Valley vibe that Sunak's in love with.
Someone I think wrote a column about how basically this is the talk of a tech bro.
Yeah,
and it really is. And there's something. I mean, it's funny as usual with Rishi. It's funny.
Yeah. But
there's also something tasteless about it. I mean, he went on to This Morning this week with Ryland Clark and Rochelle Humes to talk about it all. And it was, made a big joke about it. Oh, I do have the odd nut, I'll say. But I mean, actually, again, that's a program with a mass viewership of, which I'm sure includes many of the people that we've just been talking about, who are mums who are skipping meals, who have kids who are not, eating enough.
Yeah.
And just to listen to this idiot talking about how he, the reason he's so brilliant is because for 36 hours at the beginning of the week, he doesn't eat anything. No one cares. And keep it to yourself, mate.
He's a clown. Which reminds me of this week's New European front cover, which you'll enjoy. I won't give it away completely, but it's
the one that's coming up.
The next one, which is which depicts him in a clown-like
I think I'm
fashion.
writing this, aren't I?
You are writing it. You haven't seen the cover yet, though, have you?
Well, give me the cover and then I can write it. I am the caption writer.
I'm torn between two covers. One is a very wonderful homage to the great George Lewis of Esquire magazine design, and he once did a fantastic Richard Nixon cover where Nixon had all these hands kind of doing his makeup and stuff like this after his appalling TV show. So there's an idea based around that. And then there's an idea, you can tell we rip all our ideas off from people who are genuinely creative. There's an idea from...
Great artists still,
of course,
great
as Picasso said.
Yeah.
There's an idea based on an Obama front cover that a magazine called Adbusters did. So anyway, there's two different ideas. I don't know which one we're going to go with yet, but both of them are very funny.
He's a joker. He's a joker.
He is.
He's not as cool as Joaquin Phoenix.
He definitely not Joaquin Phoenix. Now, you used a word there in your summary of ketosis, or the symptoms of ketosis, brain fog.
Oh yes,
which is
of course,
but this is the best segue into something else I want to talk about, which is Jürgen Klopp.
Ah, well,
because the funniest moment of the great by the way, if people don't know, I am a Liverpool fan, so there's my declaration of interest.
You might pick that up.
Jürgen Klopp in a press conference someone said, as they were starting the press conference, he heard somebody off camera, off microphone, complaining about suffering from brain fog, right? And he said, "Why can't I say that when you can say it? And whenever I say it, everybody complains and tells me that I can't say it." And he said, what are you talking about? He said, "I can't never say the word brain fuck," right? And they went, the whole room burst out laughing. He said, no, not brain fuck, brain fog. And Jürgen was like, "Oh, what's that?" This guy, so it was all explained to him. Anyway, that's my way into talking a little bit about a man I think has transformed not only a football club's fortunes and sense of self, but a city, really, a whole city's sense of self. There may be Evertonians switching off now and throwing their computers into canals.
Well, we can handle that.
I suspect most Evertonians would agree that Klopp has been nothing but good for Liverpool, the city. And I just thought it was worth talking about how a man, a woman, from a totally different walk of life can have such a sort of sense of political rightness about them in the best possible way, and of humanity and of socialism with a lowercase s, and just a sense of dignity that he has somehow through football articulated the values of an entire city and beyond. I think it's utterly incredible and totally commendable.
There's something going on. I mean, as you know, my knowledge of football is very extensive, and I've taught you all.
Despite your father being a Newcastle
I know.
player,
It's appalling. I know it's little to do, but I do think what is interesting is that sports leaders and sports people seem to me to be one of the last group of people that have trust. Yeah. So, we've talked about Dear England and Gareth Southgate and all that, and then, the Lionesses and Klopp seems to me to be another person who falls into that category.
Yes. And I think maybe that's why
a role model.
They hate Gary Lineker so much.
Well, because he's so strong.
Trusted,
and he is the most... he's one of the... Tim Davie, the DG of the BBC, for him, Lineker is one of the biggest problems because he is not controllable.
Yeah, and he's dangerous because people trust him.
Yes, because exactly.
And he tells the truth.
Exactly. It's not like a news presenter tweeting.
Yeah.
When Lineker tweets, people listen. They may not agree, but, he has a huge trust rating.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating that sports... I know sports is not without controversy, but when you compare it to politics, the judiciary, business, the levels of trust in sport are very high.
Yes.
There's something in that.
Definitely. There's also a passion which is easily articulated in sport. And it's a funny thing when you see the Cop, for instance, with before the game singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," and you think about who those people are singing that song collectively like a hymn. I once took Tony Parsons, who's a friend of mine, to watch Liverpool Man United, and we had really good seats in the main stand, and they started singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." Now Tony's a mad Arsenal fan.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
and he won't thank me for saying this, but there was this chirpy Cockney voice behind me, going, "When you walk through a storm." I turned around and said, "Tony, He said, well, you can't not sing. It's like being in church, You have to, and it was true. There is a religious aspect to it that overtakes the kind of things you'd be embarrassed of in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But suddenly, grown men are hugging each other, singing a hymn on the terraces. Whichever club you go to, we've all got our hymns now, and there's something wonderful. And it shouldn't be underestimated about the power of sport, I think, to elevate people.
Yes, and that sense of belonging and identification you have. So, one of the great sporting stories, certainly of my lifetime, has been the kind of meteoric rise of women's football.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, was, in quite a misogynistic way, treated as a joke until suddenly it's everywhere, and people talk about men's. They actually say the men's football, the international side. Because to distinguish them from the Lionesses, and we all know the Lionesses by name, and this is a great. I mean, this tells you something about the growth areas in our culture. And politics.
Very, very good timing for me, because my brilliant
and your daughter
Sky plays for Millwall under-18s.
So she's gone up to under-18 now.
She's
of course,
up to under-18s,
wow.
and they're having a good season. They're in good cup competitions. It's a great team.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
It's wonderful to behold. And occasionally I run the line for them, which mortifies my daughter. She says,
Brilliant.
I take it far too seriously and I run too hard, with the other dads are just sauntering up and down. But it's you're right. It's great. And it's people like Joey Barton, Joey Barton's made himself a complete arse in this stuff about, I don't want women commentators on radio telling me about football because they've never been tackled by grown men.
It just sounds
neither
like
was John Motson.
About 100 years out of date.
It totally.
But what's
ridiculous.
Interesting is that if he was a politician, that would entrench the "they're all the same" instinct. Whereas he is like, he's just an idiot.
Yeah,
he's just an idiot.
It's a shame because he's not an idiot. I don't think he is an idiot.
Well, he's an idiot to say that, though, isn't he?
He's an idiot to say that, yeah.
I mean, it's unreconstructed nonsense.
It is.
And it also shows that he's not looking outside the window.
It really...
Because people, all of this country was behind the Lionesses. It wasn't
I think he's embarrassed himself on that score.
He really was.
Listen, that's a wonderful conversation.
So farewell, Jürgen,
we'll come back to Jürgen when he leaves.
Godspeed and
Liverpool for the title, etc., etc.
Exactly.
So please, hope you've enjoyed all that. Get your questions in, any feedback, whether you like it or loathe it, let us know to the two Matts at tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS at tnepublishing.com. And thank you for all those who have emailed in last week. We love getting your emails and feedback. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can message us very easily there just by tapping into the little box on the podcast page. And that's exactly what Jonathan Fogel did, who says, the New European this week highlights the right-wing press seeking to smear Starmer. His Brexit stance smears him. Why is the New European supporting Starmer and a Brexit party? Maybe we'll come back with that and answer that directly, Jonathan,
in
our Q&A episode
coming up on Sunday.
Indeed. So thank you for that, Jonathan. Please remember our subscription offer. If you like this podcast, you will love The New European. Head to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. And there is a link in the show notes, and it's the best way to support our journalism. Thank you as ever to producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio, assisted by Ollie Piart. And until next week,
it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.